we start Cicero from Plutarch's Lives, translated by John Dryden, revised by Arthur Hugh Clough. It is generally said that Helvia, the mother of Cicero, was both well-born and lived a fair life, but of his father nothing is reported but in extremes. For whilst some would have him the son of a fuller and educated in that trade, others carry back the origin of his family to Tullus Atius, an illustrious king of the Volscians, who waged war not without honor against the Romans. However, he who first of that house was surnamed Cicero seems to have been a person worthy to be remembered, since those who succeeded him not only did not reject, but were fond of that name, though vulgarly made a matter of reproach. For the Latins call a vetch cicer, and a nick or dent at the top of his nose, which resembled the opening in a vetch, gave him the surname of Cicero. Cicero, whose story I am writing, is said to have replied with spirit to some of his friends, who recommended him to lay aside or change the name when he first stood for office and engaged in politics, that he would make it his endeavor to render the name of Cicero more glorious than that of Scauri and Catullus. And when he was quaestor in Sicily and was making an offering of silver plate to those that he considered to be gods and goddesses, and had inscribed his two names, Marcus and Tullius, instead of the third, he jestingly told the artificer to engrave the figure of a vetch by them. Thus much is told us about his name. Of his birth it is reported that his mother was delivered without pain or labor on the 3rd of the new calends, the same day on which now the magistrates of Rome pray and sacrifice for the emperor. It is said also that a vision appeared to his nurse, and foretold the child she then suckled should afterwards become a great benefit to the Roman state. To such presages, which might in general be thought mere fancies and idle talk, he himself ere long gave credit of true prophecies, for as soon as he was of an age to begin to have lessons, he became so distinguished for his talent, and got such a name and reputation among the boys, that their fathers would often visit the school, that they might see young Cicero, and might be able to say that they themselves had witnessed the quickness and readiness in learning for which he was renowned, and the more rude among them used to be angry with their children, and to see them as they walked together, receiving Cicero with respect into the middle place, and being as Plato would have the scholar-like and philosophical temper, eager for every kind of learning, and indisposed to no description of knowledge or instruction. He showed, however, a more peculiar propensity to poetry, and there is a poem now extant made by him when a boy in tetrameter verse, called Pentius Glaucus, and afterwards, when he applied himself more curiously to these accomplishments, he had the name of being not only the best orator, but also the best poet in Rome, and the glory of his rhetoric still remains, notwithstanding the many new modes in speaking since his time. But his verses are forgotten. And out of all repute, so many ingenious poets have followed him. Leaving his juvenile studies, he became an auditor of Philo the academic, whom the Romans, above all other scholars of Clitomachus, admired for his eloquence and loved for his character. He also sought the company of the Vaccii, who were eminent statesmen and leaders in the Senate, and acquired from them a knowledge of the laws. For some short time he served in arms under Sulla in the Marsian War, but perceiving the Commonwealth running into factions, and from faction all things tending to an absolute monarchy, he betook himself to a retired and contemplative life, and conversing with the learned Greeks, devoted himself to study till Sulla had obtained the government, and the Commonwealth was in some kind of settlement. At this time, Chrysogonus, Sulla's emancipated slave, having laid an information about an estate belonging to one who was said to have been put to death by prescription, had brought it himself for 2,000 drachmas, and when Roscius, the son and heir of the dead, complained and demonstrated the estate to be worth 250 talents, Sulla took it angrily to have his actions questioned, and preferred a process against Roscius for the murder of his father. Chrysogonus managing the evidence, none of the advocates durst assist him, but fearing the cruelty of Sulla, avoided the cause. The young man, being thus deserted, came for refuge to Cicero. Cicero's friends encouraged him, saying he was not likely ever to have a fairer and more honorable introduction to public life. He therefore took the defense, carried the cause, and got much renown for it. But fearing Sulla, he traveled into Greece and gave it out that he did so for the benefit of his health. And indeed he was lean and meager, and had such a weakness in his stomach that he could take nothing but a spare and thin diet, and that not till late in the evening. His voice was loud and good, but so harsh and unmanaged that in vehemence and heat of speaking he always raised it to so high a tone that there seemed to be reason to fear about his health. When he came to Athens, he was a hearer of Antiochus of Ascalon, with whose fluency and elegance of diction he was much taken, although he did not approve of his innovations in doctrine. For Antiochus had now fallen off from the new academy, as they call it, and forsaken the sect of Carneades, whether that he was moved by the argument of manifestness, and the senses are, as some say, had been led by feelings of rivalry and opposition to the followers of Clitomachus and Philo to change his opinions, and in most things to embrace the doctrine of the Stoics. But Cicero rather affected and adhered to the doctrines of the new academy, and purposed with himself, if he should be disappointed of any employments in the Commonwealth, to retire hither from pleading and political affairs, and to pass his life with quiet in the study of philosophy. But after he had received the news of Sulla's death, and his body strengthened again to exercise, was come to a vigorous habit, his voice managed and rendered sweet and full to the ear, and pretty well brought into keeping with his general constitution, his friends at Rome earnestly soliciting him by letters, and Antiochus also urging him to return to public affairs, he again prepared for his orators instrument of rhetoric, and summoned into action his political faculties, diligently exercising himself in declamations and in attending the most celebrated rhetoricians of the time. Now, one of the things